Please don't skin me for this one. I mean, well, yeah. So here we go. Sometimes I stress myself out trying to come up with something serious and impactful that'll make people think hard, maybe even change their lives for the better. But you know what? It's not always that serious. Let me just talk about something light-hearted today and just breathe, okay? All right. Hi, it's Mutizi again, and today I'm exploring women. We love them, especially me. Without one, I wouldn't have been born. I wouldn't have been as well educated. Shout out to Mrs. Kapoor in case you watch this. And I would not have had anyone to have kids with. Isn't that nice? So what am I saying about women? I've had them around me, or they've been around me for as long as I can remember. At home, even though we had no sister, we were just boys, there were still women around me, and one of them was my mom. Then there was my younger aunties who came to live with us while they were in college. And others were the house helps or maids that were employed to take care of us. By the way, I live in a post-colonial country, so here having maids is just a very normal thing. Who else was there? Oh yes, there was my classmates, my schoolmates, and finally the teachers at our school. Those are the women that I got to see basically on a daily basis. And with that cloud of women and girls, you'd think that as I grew up, by the time I got to adulthood, perhaps I'd have figured women out completely, but no. Since I was a shy child, I never had the guts to really talk to women and ask them deeper questions, that kind of thing. But when I got to university, that's when I got bolder and more manly. And I managed to do at least a proper personal study of them. And then they started to make sense. Sort of. What I used to do is I'd make friends with the ladies that I'd make friends with who seemed interesting. I would ask them some questions and just get to, get into their minds to figure things out for research purposes only. One particularly interesting one was my friend A, who sadly passed away a year or two ago. A and I joined the university during the same year and actually attended the same classes for a while. We weren't close friends immediately. In fact, we weren't friends at all for almost a year. And that was because for most of that year, A hated me. It was so intense, I could just see it in her eyes. And not just her eyes, but her whole face. She was roommates with a good friend of mine, M. And every time I'd meet them together, M would smile and say hi. We'd have some chit chat. But A would just give me this face like a sneer. And then after we were done, they'd just walk away. And I never understood it. She and I weren't buddies who fell out or something. We were just some people who attended the same classes, shared some friends. But for the first several months, we didn't really speak. Thankfully, sometime during our first or second semester of year one, our beef ended. How? Well, one fateful day, she and M were walking through the library and they crossed my path. The usual happened. M was there, we were having small talk, and A was just on the side thinking, here we go again. Then, for some reason, I just decided that this was the day that I was going to be a tough guy and do what we call here in Kenya forcing issues. I just decided, you know what, today is the day. So I looked A straight in the eye and I decided to just include her in the conversation or the discussion I was having with M. I don't remember exactly what I told her, but I think I asked her something, and then there were a few jokes I sprinkled into the convo, and that time, to my surprise, she smiled. Just smiled? No, she laughed, as in a really good one, and I couldn't believe it. And you know what? From that day, the storm was over. From then on, A and I gradually became fast friends, and we often had long and interesting talks. So obviously, there came the day when I finally asked her, hey, and why did you used to hate me? You know what she said? She said, it's because during those days, in the evening after supper, she'd be in their dormitory waiting for M to come, and so that they could talk, girl talk, stuff like that. So she'd wait and wait and wait, and then finally M showed up. She'd ask her, hey, I thought you were supposed to come at this time so we could talk. What were you doing? And M would answer, oh, I was outside talking to Skilo. Skilo? Again? Skilo is what they used to call me because there was a rapper at that time who had the same name, Skilo, and he was short and
I wish I was a little bit taller.
well, if you're old enough, you might remember. It was around 96, 97 age. So that's the short story of how I went from being hated to being an almost BFF to a woman. Amazing. How many of you have heard of the Beijing conference? The one about empowering women. Anyone? Well, here in Kenya, it was a huge deal. Back in 1995, from the 4th to the 15th of September, about 17,000 people from all over the world flocked to Beijing, China for a conference on women equality in society and how to achieve it. I don't remember there being any world conference that we talked about this much and for this long. If that conference had been held nowadays when there's social media, there would have been memes for years, I can tell you. So the delegates went and came back from the Beijing conference. We always assumed they're all women, by the way. And it became a thing that whenever any men versus women discussions came up, the women would say,
we went to Beijing.
Meaning we are now empowered, so things have changed. Men would also tease women when assumed gender roles came up, like let's say who should carry a heavy load or something. Men would look women in the eye and say, well, you went to Beijing, right? Sort yourself out. At least that's what happened in my small circle of friends. And that's the light-hearted side of it. But it was assumed in general that the conference actually bore fruit and women actually had more power and the imbalance had now been addressed. Somewhat. Well, a certain incident some years later had me thinking that maybe not. There I was at a certain office just minding my business and doing my work. Then along comes this lady who worked at that office and who we were on pretty good terms with. And she looks at me and she says, hey, could you help me change the water bottle on that dispenser over there? It's heavy and so-and-so who normally helps me put it up, he is not here today, so please. I was like, okay, no problem. So I proceeded to go get the water bottle from where it was. And I was, just before I put it on the dispenser, I said to the lady something like, that's why you guys need men around. Somewhere close by, unbeknownst to me, was a colleague of this lady that had asked for my help. And when she heard what I said, she yelled out, what did you say? As she came round the corner. I can't remember exactly what she said, but it went something like, what I said was sexist and that I should be careful not to use such words in that office. You would think that in the non-sexist world that I had just been introduced to, that the lady who just educated me would pick up the heavy water bottle and do what? Put it on the dispenser herself. Or at least tell her colleague who'd asked for my help to go ahead and show me just how non-reliant on men they were. But that didn't happen. I still had to flex my huge masculine muscles and hoist the water bottle onto my shoulder and plop it onto the dispenser so those ladies and anyone else could have a drink. It seems that in some places, equality hasn't quite been achieved. Let's first of all describe what polygamy is. It's the practice or custom of having more than one wife or husband at the same time. That's the definition I got from Oxford's online dictionary. And I must say that I'm surprised because honestly, I thought polygamy is strictly the practice of a man marrying more than one woman at the same time. And that the one for a woman with more than one husband is called polyandry. Anyway, the one I'm talking about is the one man and two wives, okay? So one day there I am having yet another conversation with a lady friend and somehow things turned to marriage. And I decided to ask her just something controversial and expecting an obvious answer, like, no. So I asked this friend whether she would be okay with her man, her husband, marrying another woman, or whether she would agree to be a second wife or something like that. Now, instead of her replying swiftly like, no, of course not, he would have to choose either she or me. Instead of doing that, the chick went silent and she looked away and she said, well, so long as it's just me and that lady, just the two of us, and I would have to make sure that I sit down and talk to that guy and talk to the other wife actually and make sure that we lock our man down so that he just sticks to only the two of us and not anyone else. Imagine my surprise, my bafflement. This, by the way, is an educated urban young woman I was talking to. She and I were in her 20s at the time, actually. So I expected her to be like, more embracing of modern thinking, like polygamy is wrong. It's just a way of men cheating without being illegal or whatever. No, she was actually more accommodating than I thought. And she wasn't the only one who shocked me in this way. I remember getting that reaction from at least one other woman I spoke to later on in life, though I can't remember the convo and even who it was exactly. And then, just last year, towards the end of the year, I saw another, from the way she was writing, she seemed like she was an educated and modern woman on Twitter, which is now X, posting for the world to see that she just met this guy. Okay, I don't know if they'd just met, but she had met this guy who was so amazing and she was in love with him and he was also in love with her, but he was married. Let me just tell you, her timeline was lit. People were calling her a home wrecker and all that kind of stuff, but she said, well, his wife knows about us and is okay about it. So, is it really that wrong? That makes me think of a Bible verse that I've seen and I've thought about often. And it says, for 7 women will take hold of one man on that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our disgrace. That's actually the beginning of Isaiah chapter 4. And I know it's not a prophecy about things that will happen, here in my country where I live. But it just makes me wonder, does there ever come a time when a woman is willing to share a man? During the times that Isaiah was prophesying about the future times, the men would become corrupt and disrespectful and wouldn't even be able to rule properly. So then there would be a deficit of good men around, leading to some women being willing to even share the good ones left. Could the answers I got from the women I spoke to, that I wasn't expecting at all, be a symptom of something wrong in our society, just like it was in Isaiah's future Israel? Well, this was meant to be a study of, an explanation of my study of women. And the only thing I can conclude is, from what I've said, is that women are interesting creatures. You may think that you have them all figured out, but nope. Never assume anything. In fact, you'll only get to know one really well when you sit down and talk to her, and not just once, at length, like several times, and actually for years. Maybe you'd even have to marry her. This is to the men, by the way. And even when you do get to know her, be prepared for her to change her mind. I think I need to escape right now. So thanks for watching. Take care, y'all. And you will see me in the next video. Cheerio. Ooh, how could I end a video like that?